This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Welcome to the 2024 Christmas special of the OI podcast, and we are super happy to be joining you all here for your Christmas dinner at 12 noon on Christmas Day. And we're feeling super special here, and we've got a studio full today. We've got myself, Dr. Barb, and
I'm Trudi.
and
Mathew, Kiore.
And the newly made Professor Janice Lord from the Botany Department. Janice didn't realise I was going to do that, so she's blushing soon. Anyway, congratulations on your amazing professorship. Well done, and definitely overdue.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here. This is a special Christmas botanical quiz / information / chat. It's going to be an amazing hour. It's going to go like that. But before we get into the craziness of Christmas, we're just going to pause for a second. And the amazing Matt Kiore here has offered to do us a karakia.
O mauri ora whānau, mea noi tātou. Ko te aro te pau wa kia mau, ko te aro te pau tiri a kia au. Kia mau, kia u te pau o te araha ki wainua tātou nei whānau. Hau me hui e...
Tai kie. And Merry Christmas. Bon Natale. Feliz Natale.
Feliz Navidad.
Good Yule.
Joy Noel. And in Dutch, it's Vrolijk Kerstfest.
Frau Weihnachten.
Frau Weihnachten. Schöne Weihnacht for the Swiss.
Is it good yet?
Yeah, so Swedish and Norway, it's very confusing because they are spelt the same, G-O-D, J-U-L, but in Swedish it's pronounced something along the lines of good year, and in Norwegian it's pronounced like god jul. Crazy. And in Finnish, I promised that I would do this one, it's pronounced like Huva Julua.
And in Korean, is it Melikirimissiu or something?
Well done.
Melikirimis.
It's very similar to how you would pronounce it if you were saying it in Te Reo.
Yeah.
So it's Melikirisimu. Oh, Jenny Lee is going to be laughing her head off at me on this one. And I'm going to leave the last one to Matt.
And in te reo Māori, mere krihimete. Mere krihimete te ia koutou.
Excellent. So, what a lot. So I've tried to include there Portuguese, I've got Spanish, French, Italian, Dutch, German, Swiss, Norwegian, Swedish, Finnish, Te Reo and Korean. And I think Japanese is very similar to Korean. So what I tried to do was say Merry Christmas to all my work colleagues around the world in their native language. But I'm sure I'm going to get quite a few comments on it. Oh, anyway, huge welcome to everyone. We're recording this on the 18th, so we can ask, have you got your decorations up already? Have you got your Christmas decorations up, Dr. Trudi?
No, I don't, Dr. Barb. We don't have Christmas decorations anymore since the whānau grew up and gone all bar humbug on me.
Oh, but you're wearing the earrings.
Oh, I'm Christmas decorated, and I even have 3 Christmas dresses I bought, and I wear them one each Monday all through December, a different Christmas dress each day.
Wow. And Professor Janice?
We're very late. I actually pulled the Christmas boxes out of the top cupboard this morning.
Wow.
Because I thought Barb was going to ask me this.
Yeah, and I did. See?
There is one small wreath attached to that's as far as I got this morning before I had to rush out the house.
Excellent. Oh, no, that's fantastic. And now I know Ange has been well at work in your house there, Matt.
Yes, she sure has. Our moko arrived last week, so they arrived to lots of Christmas decorations and stockings hanging in front of the fireplace. And yes. It's very decorated up at our whare.
And she's done a fantastic job there. And of course, we have a slightly odd situation at our house because someone put the lights up the Christmas before COVID, and then with COVID all starting off.
You haven't taken them down.
I didn't take them down. I was just like, I'm just going to wait until it's over. And now I've kind of just got used to them being there. So we have twinkly lights there all the time, and there's a little bit of tinsel that just stays around the windows.
Nothing wrong with fairy lights.
I tell you what, when my lovely wife, she was stuck away for COVID in the first lockdown, and so I decided while I was stuck at home to put a whole lot of my deer antlers into a big thing that I bolted to the wall. We put all the fairy lights around it.
Oh, no.
That's really cool.
Very innovative.
Very innovative.
They've been up full time as well.
Yeah. No, so some fairy lights all the time, but we will get a tree. We haven't done that yet, and every year we kind of alternate our trees with how we're going with the trees. We're a little bit strange with our trees, and I thought we could talk a little bit first because it's the Christmas episode and it's all about botany. I thought we could talk about the Christmas tree first because it's the obvious botanical thing of Christmas, right? The Christmas tree. I think we can say that that's the first one that comes out, and I thought I can talk a little bit about the history of it, which is crazy. Honestly, I went down a complete side quest on the Christmas tree. Obviously, Celts, Druids, all to do with the Christmas tree. And Saturnalia, which is fantastic. The Saturnalia is the festival. It's the Roman festival. And Saturnus is the Roman god of agriculture and husbandry. So, like, all things farming related.
Not husbands, just
not husbands, like looking after looking after animals.
Well,
anyway, so Saturnalia, and fans of the Big Bang Theory will be like au fait with Saturnalia because it's Sheldon's big thing is he hates Christmas but he loves Saturnalia as a holiday. Anyway, so they all had trees, and it was all about bringing the green indoors during winter. So these evergreen coniferous trees, it was all about bringing them in. And then really Christianity and Christmas had nothing to do with the Christmas tree until Martin Luther. Not Martin Luther King. Martin Luther. The original Martin Luther, sorry. Not Martin Luther King. Martin Luther. So it's like in the sort of late 1400s, early 1500s. And yeah, it was that whole Protestant thing. And they put lights on it. So it comes from the German, and when Lithuania and Estonia were joined up as one country there. And that's where it comes from. And it comes from Germany through into Britain with Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. So they had their Christmas tree, and then they had this big special of Christmas trees. Had a big Christmas tree in like 1848 in Windsor Castle, and there was pictures of it in the Illustrated London Times, and then it became popular. And it was really much, much later that it went into America, because the Americans didn't like the idea of Christmas trees because it wasn't about the sacred. So it really didn't go into America until the 20th century, quite late. And now, of course, they've gone crazy with it.
So good old Queen Vic, the early influencer.
Yeah. But way prior to her, bringing evergreen foliage into the house in winter was a Celtic thing.
Yeah. So the whole idea of just bringing evergreen things into the house in winter, and I don't know, is there anything like that in Te Ao Māori?
I think about that Ako and like the Maramataka, so our calendar of things, and I think Christmas, not necessarily something significant around Christmas other than around kai.
Right.
So we look for the tikoka, the kōwhai, they're all indicators of the kaimoana being fat.
Yeah.
And the remurumu blooms and the moana this time of the year when the tikoka and the kōwhai are blooming. So,
yeah. But of course,
and then we bring that kai into the whare.
Yeah, but of course Christmas, like the equivalent would have been midwinter here, would have been about Matariki time. And there are lots of there are plants associated with Matariki, aren't there?
Aye. And more around the hautapu where we cook kai that acknowledges the kaitaki of wellness, the different kaitaki of Matariki and her children, Waiti, Waita, Waipuna, like all of those kaitaki. And the hautapu is really around which of those kais we use to acknowledge their abundance, because all of our wellness is actually related to kai. all the things that impact kai, so the weather and the rains and all those sorts of things, which is what those kaitiaki associate to. But obviously not an expert on matariki, but definitely the kai and the different things. I'd almost consider myself an expert on kai. Mahinga kai anyway.
Yeah. Well, I may have been a bit slack with my decorations, but I have been baking ever since First Advent. So because my husband's German, so that's the Frau Weihnachten, and they have biscuits, they have Blätzchen, and the idea is it's all about welcoming people into your house. So it resonates quite well in Te Ao Māori, I think, but it's all about making a lot of different biscuits. And so you have lots of types of biscuits, and they're all different flavours and shapes, and they're all like quite preciously made. And then you offer them to everyone who comes in, and you make a big thing on the first Advent, the second Advent, the third Advent, and then the fourth Advent, which is the 4 Sundays before Christmas Eve, basically. So you're eating from the 1st of December, which was first Advent this year, all the way through. So
yeah, I think like similar to our pātaka. So our pātaka kai, where we'd store our kumara and all of our food stores, would be similar, I suppose, in terms of making sure we had kai right through winter.
Yeah.
And
Anyway.
it's in the middle, so you think, we've got to stretch it out. So we'll just have like a little feast in the middle just to keep us going, to make sure we get to the other end. And I think bringing the greenery, like when you're locked up with your animals for, 6-8 weeks a year, perhaps bringing the greenery halfway through just alleviates some of the odour.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about odour, because the Christmas tree traditional Christmas trees are European conifers, so they're the evergreens from now I'm going to let you say the Pinaceae.
Mm.
Do you say the Pinaceae?
I say Pinaceae, but it's Latin, so who knows, they're all dead.
In Germany, in Germany they all say the Pinaceae.
Well, we should ask in Italian, so that's probably, if you know any Italian.
Do we know any Italians?
There's discussion over that as well.
There is.
I used to know someone who swore that the Italians wouldn't know anything about it. The best person to ask would be British clergy.
Who know the best Latin.
I'm sure there's someone done a PhD on this.
Anyway, so the traditional Christmas trees are commonly known as firs, spruces and pines, which is quite a big group. And they have different attributes. So they're different, like in countries that are not New Zealand, because here we all just have a Pinus radiata. It's by far the most common.
Speak for yourself.
What do you have for Christmas tree? The Pinus radiata is by far the most common Christmas tree in New Zealand.
You can buy firs as Christmas trees. They're sort of nice and bushy.
Oh, we don't even buy them. We just go find a pine tree and lop
we
a branch
all
off.
just cut down a Pinus radiata.
With permission on private land, of course. Yeah, of course, Barbara, isn't it?
No, it was with permission and it was on private land, so I should clarify that. What do you do,
on
Matt?
the side of the road?
Well, I think to save the trees, we now have an artificial one.
Well, see, my thinking is if you're cutting down a Pinus radiata, it's probably a wilding pine, so it's doing good for the environment. So you're better off cutting down, because it's true that artificial trees, they, like over time, it means that but you have to keep the artificial tree for a long time before it actually pays off in environmental terms. But I have seen some amazing ones when I was researching this show, made out of basically origami, from like the early 1900s, and they're just like these massive ones. The first artificial trees were like origami, but the ones in Germany, and their tree is amazing. So the most common in Germany is a pine that I've never heard of outside of this. It's called the Nordmann fir. And it's not the Norway fir, and it's not the it's the Nordmann fir, Abies Nordmanniana. And 40% of Germans have this tree. But Germans obviously they started the whole Christmas tree thing, and they take their Christmas trees really, really seriously. So
I think they take everything really seriously, but to be honest,
But I thought it was interesting that different countries have different preferences for their Christmas trees. So in America, it's Douglas fir, Pseudotsuga menzesii, which you can get here, of course. We have Douglas firs. Yep. But I've never heard of this Abies Nordmanniana.
Well, I don't think it even occurs in New Zealand. So if you were going to smuggle one in, you'd get into trouble.
You'd get into big trouble, yes.
Yeah.
But,
so if you got one at home,
Don't tell anyone.
Don't.
Yeah. Burn the...
But I thought it was interesting that different countries have a preference for different trees, and it might just be what's there. But I also thought it was interesting when I started looking up Christmas trees. Oh my God, what a rabbit hole I went down. There are like at least 20, but probably more, different trees, like different species of tree that different people consider the Christmas tree. So it's like spruces, they tend to like them because they're stronger, but they have really sharp, prickly needles, and they lose their needles, and then you get them stuck in your feet. So, but they're strong. So if you've got really heavy ornaments, then you go for a spruce, right?
Right.
And the fir has they have softer, flatter leaves, and you can't roll them between your fingers, but they're really expensive because everybody likes them. So it's kind of like the...
Why do you need to roll the leaves?
Oh, no, that's just how you tell them. That's just how you tell them. You don't need to do it.
You're saying it's like a bad thing.
No, it's just... But like they're sort of flat on the top, so you can put... and it's like sort of lighter ones. And then the pines are apparently more open, but they're softer branches, so they're used for lighter ornaments. And that has the Pinus radiata and the Scotch pine and the lodgepole pine. Pinus contorta. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, stubby little thing.
Yeah, and I guess that's it. Like some people like shorter pines.
Well, it depends on your ceiling height, doesn't it? You don't want to be too ambitious.
My dad always got the biggest one he could get, and then he'd get it home, and like it was, I don't know, it's like our tradition. We'd go out and we'd cut, like there was wilding pines, obviously. So we'd go out and we'd cut one, and we'd try and find one that had a nice shape and everything, and then we'd bring it home, and it wouldn't fit, so we'd cut the top of it.
The top, not the bottom.
I know, it's...
You have to.
You need to keep the good base.
That's what he'd say. You need to keep the ball.
But then you've got nothing to put the star on the top.
Yeah, well, he'd always put it on the
stumpy bit.
The stumpy bit. Yeah.
Well,
and I think
we used to bring a Christmas tree into work.
Yeah.
You know, it was always my challenge is how do we get it there? And one year we had to drive with him squished in the passenger seat and all the seats down it, and I'm just barely seeing and hoping not going to get pulled over as this kind of pine trees driven along the peninsula into town.
But you could have something native.
Well, that's what we do. Now that we're in town, we've decided that we're going to have something native. And what we do is every year we try a different native tree to see which is best with the ornaments.
And then you plant it afterwards.
And then we plant it afterwards. So we've got like a whole heap of... So we had a nio, and that worked really well.
Your dogs didn't eat the leaves.
The dogs... Is they poisonous to dogs?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, I don't know if dogs, but they're cool lambs.
Oh, no, I don't have lambs.
No, well, there you go. That's probably a good thing.
Oh, gosh.
At least not inside.
Well, you don't anymore.
Other than the ones we're cooking for Christmas dinner.
Yeah. You don't have a little nativity scene with...
Yeah, no, I don't have a nativity
no.
scene. But we tried Griselinea broadleaf, and that was beautiful because they had big, shiny green leaves. It wasn't super good. Like, it's a bit floppy on the ends, to be honest. We had a Corfi one year, which was lovely because it had a really lovely branch structure. It was really nice and open. And we did plant that as well. Mm-hmm. But
I've tried Carpaditas, Puta Weta in the North Island, or Pari
Carpaditas.
Yes, because that's got a lovely...
It's got a lovely structure, hasn't it?
Lovely branch structure.
Yeah.
So that one works. Kahikatea looks very elegant.
Oh, yes.
You could go quite minimalist, urban chic with a kahikatea.
Ah, yeah.
Rimu.
Yeah. Beautiful
droopy
foliage.
Yeah, if you've got ornaments that
we'll just have a side conversation with the botanist kind of.
Go on, Matt. What's your choice if you were going to have a native?
If I was going to have a native, I would probably a young manuka.
I
like the smell of the manuka.
Because you've got the smell. Yeah, because that's a very important thing. Like a lot of people, when we're talking about the spruces and the firs and the pines, the fragrance is the thing that draws them to something. So yeah, and I think
in America you can buy spray-on pine smell.
Oh, yeah, buy everything in America. And of course, in New Zealand, what's classically called the Christmas tree is the rata, the southern rata.
Or the Pūtakawa.
Or the Pūtakawa. Is it really the Pūtakawa or the rata?
Pūtakawa more, because Pūtakawa reliably flowers at Christmas time, whereas the southern rata, I mean, it's a mast flowering species, and it will flower
and this year,
at
I think, is a mast year, because ours is just going off. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, I don't know if everybody else's is going off as well, but ours has definitely, this year, it's the most flowers that it's ever had since we've been there, and that's 12 years. And it's absolutely fantastic. I have brought some into the office, into the studio today.
Beautiful colour.
And clearly most people can't see them. But what I also did is I brought in a little branchlet of Pūtakawa, because the most common question that we get is what is the difference between rata and pahurakawa? How can we tell them apart? And I'm going to hand that over to you.
I was going to say one starts with R and the other starts with P.
I'm going to hand that over to you.
If it's got its fuzz on the back, it's a pahurakawa.
Yeah.
Roundy leaves, fuzz on the back. Think of all those fuzzy North Island surfy people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fuzzy North
Whereas the Southern rata, it's sharp, it's pointed, really on the ball.
Right.
And it's
glossy.
And it's glossy. We're sharp and glossy. They're relaxed and fuzzy.
They're relaxed.
Out there, yeah.
And
Hippies.
the pahurakawa are like a bit more kind of leathery and dull.
Well, it looks because of the fuzz, it literally has a pale fuzz on the back. We call it glaucus if we're getting technical.
Yeah.
It looks kind of greyer from a distance, a greeny grey. And you can see when the leaves are moving, you can see the white underneath. Whereas a southern rata and the northern rata are green on the back, and they always look green, and they're quite glossy.
Yeah, shiny and pointy. More pointy. And of course, the flowers, they look very similar, but I think the pahurakawa sometimes more stamens, so it looks kind of more bunchy.
Yeah. More stamens, a slightly different kind of red.
Yeah.
Yeah, more of a... it's getting... very,
sometimes
minimal difference in colour, but
and
certainly more stamens.
Unless you've got two right next to each other, one of each, it's hard to say this is a pahurakawa and this is a rata. If you're just saying the difference is one slightly.
Well, no, if you've got the leaves.
If you've got the leaves, then you're easy.
Easy, yeah.
That's the way to go.
With the flowers, the pahurakawa does look more bunchy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But go with the leaves. The leaves are and similar sizes as well. Like they can be trimmed quite small, but they can also be quite reasonable
big
trees.
Big trees, yeah.
So it's look for that whitey underneath. There. Christmas trees. It's all about Christmas trees. We'll come back to those. The next botanical thing that I think we think of is the mistletoe family.
Yes, or the two mistletoe families.
No, we're just going to talk about the one mistletoe family. Are there two mistletoe? Oh, we can talk about...
where did you...
I'm giving you a hard time.
So how many New Zealand species are in the mistletoe family?
Hold on. Did you research why mistletoe is important at Christmas? And
I did.
Where'd that tradition about kissing under mistletoe come from?
It's really weird. And there's lots of different things about it. And there's the whole mistletoe... there's like...
It's sort of the same as the evergreen foliage.
Yeah.
But mistletoes were extra super powered because they weren't growing on the ground. And they were evergreen. So when there's an evergreen bunch of something way up there in a deciduous oak that's lost its leaves in winter, then it must be magic.
Yeah. So let's get it on under the mistletoe.
Yeah. Really closely linked to druids.
Yeah. But the kissing was quite a more recent thing. That appeared sometime in the 1700s, I think.
Oh, okay.
It's a bit...
Quite late.
Quite late. But mistletoes being super special, that goes back to the Romans.
Right.
Or pre-Romans, Druids, yeah. Because they were obviously just weird.
Just there.
Because they're parasites, they have no roots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and they're really interesting plants. Mm. And I think they had like a link with luck and fertility and that kind of...
Well, the European mistletoe...
Yeah.
Viscum album, which is in the Viscaceae, which is a different family.
Oh, right, okay.
Has little white berries.
Right.
And one of the names for them was oak sperm.
because of the white,
squishy.
You squish them and they get all the white goop.
Yeah, so very strongly linked to fertility and strength and woo-woo.
And I had a thing that, like, because everybody was always worried about getting married and not getting married and who was going to get married, and that was like the whole thing of most Celtic or pagan rituals, it seems, from reading them. And it was like if you got kissed under a mistletoe, then you would get married during the year. And if you were under a mistletoe and you didn't get kissed, then you wouldn't get married that year.
Well, if you're standing under a mistletoe and everyone's walking past, that was probably a good indication you're with the wrong group of people.
But then talking about fertility, you go back to Saturnalia, that was like when... somebody bedded the local goddess, to ensure fertility for the coming year. Yeah. I hope she got to pick.
I don't know. I don't know. But it goes right back to the Norse gods and the tears of frig, I think, are the berries. So it's quite ancient and definitely predates Christianity of all times.
But you can see also how strongly it's related to winter season.
Yeah.
So many of these things make sense in terms of winter and the turning of the year so that the days are starting to lengthen and you're celebrating that or cracking open the preserves or whatever you're doing.
Yeah. And I was reading about the holly and ivy, and that's really interesting. And the holly and the oak. So there's sort of those three, they're the evergreen things in the British Isles, and the holly and the oak were both kings. So there's a holly king and the oak king. And because the holly is evergreen and the oak is deciduous, so there's no leaves, and so then you'd go through, and then the Christmas or that solstice, which winter solstice in the UK falls, the 21st, so it's just right next to Christmas, coincidentally. But the Oak King would win the fight all year round, and then they'd fight again at summer solstice. So it would be the Holly King would be in charge over the winter months, and then as you do the change, then the Oak King wins. And so it's this balance between the oak and the holly. Which I thought was, kind of interesting.
Seasonality again.
And you see you see holly in lots of things because it's so prickly that it's got this whole idea of protectiveness around it. So people would put it in front of their houses, and I don't know that it's true or not, but there's this whole theory that it doesn't conduct lightning, and so then people put it near their houses. But it didn't make sense to me, because if it doesn't conduct lightning, like you'd want something that did conduct lightning, right, so that it would get struck instead of your house. Does that make more sense?
No. I think you're overthinking it.
Never heard of that one.
Yeah. Anyway, so there's this whole
thing around about why the robin's got a red breast, because he spiked it, or she, the bird, on the holly, and that represents Christ being speared while he was on the cross. And
so
that's where
so many of those, the meaning that had built up traditionally then was used as a metaphor to convey the Christian story. The berries on the holly, the red breast on the holly, the prickly leaves.
Yeah, the holly is the crown of thorns, exactly. Yeah. And the berries is that the crown of thorns poked into Jesus, and the blood came onto the holly berries, and the berries prior to that were all white and then they're all red. And they're both clearly wrong. Even as a metaphor.
Well, I'm sorry, I wasn't there, so I can't confirm.
No, we can confirm.
It's a metaphor, just trying to teach a story in a different cultural context.
Yeah, I do get that it's a metaphor, but holly doesn't grow where Jesus was.
In Palestine, no.
In Palestine, it just doesn't grow there. No. So it's not, holly itself has nothing to do.
But it was just a metaphor to convey the story.
Of Christ. Yeah. No,
there's probably some homegrown thorns they used, and it was just adopted.
I suppose.
Well, at the Holly and the Ivy Carol, which you were going to see.
They were both full grown. Something, beats the crown and blah, 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 blah.
The ivy only gets mentioned at the start. The whole song's about the holly. And the Christian interpretation is the holly represents Christ, and the ivy is the feminine element that represents Mary.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so
that's that too.
Yeah, the male and the female, which probably also predates that. Oh, you give me a bit of mistletoe. Look at that.
And I brought in a bit of mistletoe. It was growing on a hawthorn.
Oh yes,
outside my house.
Yeah,
in a hedge.
Yes,
and the strippers were stripping it. So it's a New Zealand native.
You have strippers outside your house?
Not strippers, people cutting the hedge.
How much rum punch have you had?
Not enough of yours, sweet.
People cutting the hedge.
What hedge service was that?
That's quite keen.
0800.
So I thought I would bring it in, and I thought, because there's all these things about mistletoes, but I thought, seeing as this is a New Zealand Christmas, and mistletoes are out now.
They are.
So there's lots of mistletoe. So we've got, and I'll just go through it, we've got 6 species of mistletoe in New Zealand that are in the leafy mistletoes. So the Loranthaceae. But there is another family. 2, 3 families. Oh,
No. There's one other. There's actually
because there's the little short ones, right?
There's the dwarf mistletoes, which are Viscaceae.
Right.
Or Viscaceae.
Viscaceae,
if we're going to be.
And that's the Corthicella, is that right?
Corthicella, 3 little things. Yeah. Very hard to see because they're so tiny.
And there are some of them around, if you look really carefully, in the shrubs around Dunedin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Northern Cemetery is a good place to see them.
Yeah. Don't pick them because they're very, very rare. And all of the mistletoes in New Zealand have had a massively hard time from browsing.
Possums.
Possums is their number one enemy.
Yeah, and in fact, the extinct one, Tulipadea,
Yeah.
Adam's eye, possum browse was probably one of the reasons it went extinct.
So I wondered if you could just run through.
Oh,
Yes.
oh, on the spot.
On the spot, yeah. Well, I can start you off. We can start off with the one I've brought in. I think that's the most common one, right?
Yes, Elaeostylis. This is the common green mistletoe, and people often ask, are mistletoes native? Every single mistletoe you see in New Zealand is native.
Right.
Okay.
And they're wonderful things. They're not evil. They don't kill plants, so please leave them where they are.
And they're not just native, they're endemic, right?
They're endemic. These do not occur anywhere else. No.
And they do occur more in the South Island than in the North Island.
Dunedin is a mistletoe hotspot.
Yeah.
We're really, really good with our
And
mistletoes.
I didn't realise that because there are a lot of mistletoes in Dunedin, and until you go somewhere else, you don't realise how many mistletoes are in Dunedin. And the Museum Reserve, Te Hura, is fantastic for seeing mistletoes. Is that all Elaeostylis micranthus there?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So Elaeostylis, which is this lovely green mistletoe that was in Barbara's stripper hedge. It is actually super clever because it can grow on 100 plus different sorts of types of
I've
trees.
got 300 here.
300, yeah, and it can grow on introduced trees
And
just
introduced
as much
species.
as native species. It's very, very broad in its ability to parasitise.
Does it smother the thing that's parasite?
It can. So I've seen trees that where the actual host tree is getting a bit weak and the mistletoe is most of the foliage. So if the host tree is getting weakened for some other reason, the mistletoe could just be too much weight and break the branch.
But remember, it's not in the mistletoe's
Interest
Best
in the
interest,
host.
yeah.
right? So it's
Yeah. So it's,
sometimes forget.
so it's not a parasite that will kill the host. It doesn't benefit from killing the host.
And it's doing its own photosynthesizing as well. So it's really just taking water from the host.
Yeah. So they're very That's how they manage to grow on deciduous hosts. They're actually really wasteful of water. They're just,
Pumping out
evaporating water all the time and drawing it through the host into themselves. But they make their own carbohydrates because they're photosynthesized. They're lovely and leafy.
They're very nice.
And incredibly important food for birds with the berries. And important little refuges for invertebrates.
Yeah.
As one of my wonderful students recently found with some research. Yeah.
And propagation, can you propagate them?
No. Well, I mean, you can put them on another host, but you can't sprout the seeds and stick it in your veggie garden.
Right.
Because when the seeds germinate, they don't produce proper roots. They never make proper roots. They produce a little root-like thing called a haustorium that needs to then burrow its way into a host branch and connect to the host sap, otherwise the wee seedling dies. But you can get seeds.
Which are sort of berries, they're like drupes, right?
Yeah, and they've got chewing gum stuff on the inside, so they're pretty adapted to sticking to things. So you get some and you find a suitable host tree and you stick it on and wait a couple of years
So
usually.
this one here came off a hawthorn.
Yeah.
And so I imagine it would work on an apple tree.
Oh, yeah, I've seen them on apples. I've seen them on all sorts of things.
Pretty much give anything you go. Because this one here, the Elaeostylis micranthus, that is, now, the classic te reo name is Pirita. Yeah, and I think that kind of goes for all the mistletoes as in general name rather than a specific one for this one. And the English names are really, really imaginative. They're like white mistletoe, green mistletoe, scarlet mistletoe, red, pink mistletoe.
So this is the green. So Elaeostylis, which is the most common in Dunedin, is what's called the common green New Zealand mistletoe.
And that's flowering from September to December and fruit from December to July.
Lovely orangey yellow fruit.
Yeah. So it's flowering now.
But little wee flowers. So this is insect pollinated, so it has little wee greenish flowers.
Tiny, tiny flowers. You can't even really see them. But the bigger ones, so you've got the two paraxylars.
Yes. They are the rather rare red-flowered mistletoes that only grow on beech trees.
Right.
So they're very host specialised, very different to the common green mistletoe. They're very host specialised, but they have the beautiful red flowers. Big petals, bird pollinated.
Yeah.
So spectacular, but they also get hammered by possums.
Yeah.
So it's really...
And they're bird pollinated as well as bird dispersed because all of these are basically
They're all bird dispersed.
Bird dispersed. So the berries are being eaten by birds and pooed out on the branches of hopefully host species.
Yeah.
And then they burrow in with the little Historia you were talking about.
So if you want to be super ambitious for your next Christmas tree, you could, I don't know, find a native beech tree, get a Pyroxilla berry on it, grow your own mistletoe on your own
That would be good.
beech
We actually
tree.
have a
Sounds
beech
like
tree.
a challenge. I've got a beech tree.
There's a
We've actually
challenge
got a
for
beech
you.
tree in our garden.
Yeah.
We've
Yep.
got 2 of them. Have you got a beech tree, Matt? We should try that. Set ourselves a fuero.
We could have a competition.
all 3 of us, see who can get their
tallest.
get their mistletoe to
Because,
grow.
you know, I wouldn't be surprised if there used to be red mistletoe on the beach that's around here, but it's not here anymore. It's all sort of over towards the lakes region. So whether it's been wiped out from here because
There's a lot of bush that's gone from
a
here.
lot of bush that's gone. There were lots of possums. So
Yeah.
we don't know whether the Pyroxillas, the red mistletoes, were
We're here.
on the coastal side of Otago, but they're certainly towards the mountains.
And, you know, we've got some pretty good predator-free 2015, the Halo
Yes.
project, and really working towards getting rid of those possums.
Yeah, and reintroducing
reint-
wonderful things.
Yeah, and once we've got some reintroducing of some of the bigger trees, then hopefully we can get some of these back. But it's really talks about that connectedness, Because, you know, for some of these you've got, like the Ella stylus there, it's pollinated by insects, it's dispersed by birds, it needs a host tree of some sort to sit on. So it's quite an involved community that it has to have there. And if any one of those parts is just hammered, then it just doesn't work. And
you're waving around
I'm
the card
waving-
for my favourite
I'm waving
mistletoe.
around the last one, which I've kept till end.
There's Iliostylus. No, sorry, Alepis, which is that reddy pink one. Tupea is my favourite mistletoe
Yes.
because it's sort of the kakapo of plants, really. So Tupea antarctica is what's called the white mistletoe. It's at risk, declining. It has a large number of te reo names, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, in terms of the meaning, it would be nice to hear more about that. But Tupea has little white berries. In terms of all the mistletoes worldwide, it's a real weirdo.
Oh, is it?
It is.
Why is that?
Well, when you look at the whakapapa of all the mistletoes worldwide, it's sort of stuck up on its own. It has separate male and female plants.
Right.
Like I said, it's the kakapo of the mistletoes because, you know, if you're going to tick all the boxes for things that will make you go extinct, it does pretty well. So it's got separate male and female plants.
Yep.
Insect dispersed.
Insect dispersed.
Sorry, insect
insect
pollinated, bird
Sorry.
dispersed, but it needs males and females in order to make the fruit.
Right, yeah.
A much narrower host range.
Right.
And from what I've seen around Dunedin and what we know, I've had a student study this, it seems to prefer hosts that are on the sunny slopes of areas of bush, which are always the ones that get cleared. So loss of habitat, loss of host. Separate male and female plants, so if you end up with a population that's only males or females, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah. So what are its hosts?
Carpetitus, Hoheria, so the Malvaceae, like lowland ribbonwood and lacebark. So Hoheri, I'm trying to give many different names for the same plants.
Cosmos?
No. So in the town belt, it's on Carpetitus.
Oh, yeah, Carpetitus. That's the maple leaf.
Marble leaf or Putaputaweta if you're North Island, Pariparifota if you're South Island. In my covenant, down the coast, it's on...
That's at Kuri Bush.
Yeah, it's on Hoheria angustifolia, so fine-leafed
nice.
lacebark.
Yeah.
But I've also I've been moving it around, successfully got it growing on
That's why she's not included in the competition, folks.
But you know, I smeared these seeds on trees, host trees, and nothing happened for 2 years. And I thought, that was a waste of time. And then happened to look really close, this tiny little root that just sort of sat there.
So it just actually took a long time.
It took a very long time for it to actually slowly get into the host. And once it was in there, now they're 5 years old, and the clump of foliage is sort of getting up to
small plum pudding size.
And luckily, I've got a male and a female next to each other. So
wow.
I'm hoping for mistletoe babies at some stage. Yeah, so that's a really special one. It's something, and it's like so many things we have in New Zealand are a bit weird.
Yeah.
They're different. They're, because we're isolated and they're special and they've evolved, or they've persisted here and they've been lost elsewhere.
I think we see it out in Waipori Falls or Waipori Falls in the Pātete out there. set on that.
Very special one, and often confused with the common green one. But once you see them, particularly when they're fruiting, if you see the white fruit, you've got the special one.
Oh, that's
I think the names are interesting too, because like pirita just means to cling to.
Ah.
So piri is to like whakapiri. So we're talking about a piri pawa, like a young pawa will just cling to things. So that's what we call our kids sometimes.
That's interesting because the hydra helix, the ivy, the hydra is just Greek for to cling to.
Oh.
It's the thing that clings to it. It's like the whole.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Greek
Yeah.
to grasp.
To grasp, yeah.
Cling.
Kohu orangi is another name for it, and that kohu is like the mist, the orangi, mist of the heavens. So
I
like
love
when you
that
see
one.
see it sort of glistening in the forest, and it's like the kohu.
Beautiful.
That
sort
is
of- sort of
interesting.
the mist. So because it's it clings high in the tree. And
Oh no, that's
lots of
cool.
different.
And the last one, of course, we didn't mention is the Alepus.
Alepus, which is a lot like the Pyroxylus, in that
Yeah.
it's very host specific, and you tend to only see it on beech trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's again dispersed with the bellbirds.
Bellbirds and tuis. Yeah, so if you lose the birds, then you lose the
Yeah,
mistletoes.
it's interesting.
Yeah. For those particular mistletoes.
So, yeah. And again, we're really lucky here in Dunedin, which again I didn't really appreciate until I went to Christchurch, that not everyone has tui. I was like, crazy.
Yeah.
I actually don't know if Christchurch has bellbirds, do they?
Oh, yeah, they
Yeah,
do.
they
Yeah,
do, yeah.
but it's been a long time since I think tui have been seen on Banks Peninsula.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of work to
Try
plant
and-
corridors to get them.
To get them to move
them moved
back.
back.
Yeah. It's interesting. Hey, thanks for that, kororo, on all the mistletoes. Now, did we miss anything out about the mistletoes that you wanted to add there? No. They're beautiful.
They are.
They are. And, of course, holly and ivy, moving on to them, because they are quite kind of in that same niche as their evergreen, sort of small things. Of course, holly can be quite big.
Holly's a big tree.
It can be a big tree. Like you see it quite often as a small ornamental in people's gardens because they've trimmed it. But actually, it grows into a proper big tree, and also can be really old, like 500 years. Craziness.
I think they used to use it quite a bit for hedging.
Yeah, but again, chopped.
Yeah.
And
but
it's
still,
like-
it wasn't
Effective.
small. Yeah.
Yeah. And holly and ivy sort of go together as well. But I was thinking in a New Zealand context, and I brought some in. I brought this ivy in particular is quite a noxious weed.
Very invasive.
It's very invasive, and it actually had a really bad caricature to go with it because it was seen as because it's in kind of dark places, in kind of damp places. So the Christians kind of thought of it as a bit sly and deceitful, and so they didn't take to the ivy as quickly as they took to the holly because the metaphor just wasn't quite.
Didn't work for them,
It
so
didn't
they
work.
dropped it.
It didn't work.
Could have been
It took a
harder
long
to
time.
get to, more effort if it's
No, I think
dark,
it was just
dank places.
Yeah, it was just that they, that whole metaphor of, it was like a sly, deceitful kind of plant because it was creeping around. Quite strange. But the ivy is interesting because it has that same Historia type thing going on as the.
It's not a parasite.
It's not a parasite.
It has
but
modified roots that are
But it has modified
grasping
roots that
roots.
grasp
Yes.
into it. And it has that hydra helix that we were saying before is about the grasping. And the helix is obviously like a spiral, but one Latin and one Greek name. Who knows what they
So
were
that's
doing.
why when you pull it off, it takes the paint with it.
It takes the paint and everything. And I was looking into it, and it's really cool how it does it. It's like little nanoparticles, and it has the roots, like the normal stem, and it has these little aerial roots, and then they have little hairs on them, and then they have little nanoparticles on them, and the little nanoparticles go into the wall or into the surface, whatever it is. And as they dry, they curl up and they pull the stem or the aerial roots closer to the wall.
Cool.
So as it gets dry on that wall, it pulls in. I thought, that's crazy. Yeah, that was a real rabbit hole that I went down there. But yeah, I was going to talk about just quickly the holly, Ilex aquifolium. How am I going there, Janice?
Very good.
Yep, and that's in the Aquifoliaceae. So it's the holly is actually the type specimen for
Or the type species
species.
of the genus.
Yep,
Yep.
for that.
Or with the family.
For the family.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought maybe you could explain to the
What
the
that
audience
means.
what that means.
yeah. What is going on
Well,
about?
I mean, this comes back to, I guess, understanding diversity and when naming and describing is something that humans have done for millennia because we have to convey that information. So having names that mean something, that convey the knowledge about that plant or that animal is really important. And in classic, Western taxonomy, the hierarchies group species into genera, group genera into families, and group families into orders, and all that sort of thing. And so it all expresses relatedness to different levels. So if you've found something new and you think it's distinct enough to make it a new species, then you give it a name. But if it's also really distinct and it's more distinct than just a species, you might put it in a new genus. That species becomes the example of that genus, and that's what's meant as this species is the sort of touch point, the baseline for that genus, and everything else gets compared to that. And then in a family, if there's a whole pile of things that are really distinct from everything else, that probably have a very long evolutionary history, that are further back in the relatedness and the hierarchy of relatedness, the whakapapa, if I can sort of draw that analogy, then the first genus that was described in what you're now saying is a much bigger family becomes the type genus for that family.
Yeah.
So it's just saying, and it goes right down to individual specimens. So the first botanist, and I don't know who it was, it might have been Joseph Hooker, who described Eleostylus micranthus, which was probably called Loranthus micranthus originally.
Yeah.
There would have been a single piece that was put in a herbarium on a sheet with the name and the date next to it, and that's the type specimen.
Where it's
connected. So
when it was found.
Yeah, so the type specimen is always one piece with a known location and date and collector. So if anyone anywhere in the world says, well, I've got something I think's that, then that's the reference specimen. And these days we use DNA, so if we can extract DNA from a type specimen, we can say, well, yes, it is, no, it's not. So they're really important. We've got type specimens here in Otago.
And can I ask a question about type specimens here in Otago? Because I know in the Townsville Herbarium, the type specimens that they've got there have all got red folders as opposed to all the other ones.
Oh, they're very special, yes.
And do you have red folders on yours?
Yes, we do, because that's what you do worldwide. Yeah. So the Otago Regional Herbarium, which is in the Botany Department of the University of Otago, got about 70,000 specimens in total, but we've got several hundred type specimens, and they're in a locked fireproof cabinet, because if something happens to the type,
how do you identify?
They are the global
standard
reference for that species. Yeah.
And the red files, it actually came from the Blitz.
Oh, did it?
It came from the Blitz, yeah. Oh. So they realised everything was getting bombed, and they thought, okay, in the Blitz in London, because they had, the Victorians going around collecting stuff all over the place. And they had lots of type specimens there, and they thought, okay, if stuff is getting burned, or if there's a big fire coming through from the Blitz, we need to be able to get what's really important first. So we don't want to have it filed in amongst all the other examples of other species that are not the type specimens. So they put them in red files and they put them out. And I learned this in Townsville because I asked what the red ones were, and I thought it was just for Townsville because, cyclones and tropical storms going through. And they said, well, it is actually really helpful because of tropical storms and things going through. But yeah. So
But World War II, particularly, and the destruction of the bombing of Kew, and also the destruction of the Paris Herbarium, a lot of those herbaria had a lot of original New Zealand material because
colonisers
taking back examples. That's what the Victorians did. And since then, there have been types that have been destroyed. So we do not have the original sample of something. So these days, if you describe something new, then you send what we call isotypes,
right?
Little examples
of
the same thing to different places. They're recorded as isotypes. They're from the same plant. So there's backup. We back up.
Right. Back up everything.
Yes.
Hey, one interesting thing about the Aquifoliaceae, the holly is mainly tropical. It only has this one genus. There's over 400 species, And, of course, the holly plant is the type species, but it is not tropical at all.
This is botanical imperialism.
It's the first one that they thought of.
No,
because
but it's not. This has happened over and over again.
It's crazy, isn't it?
That because the system has come from Europe and they describe the holly because that's the one they've got.
Yeah.
And then put their way around the world and see these other things that are related to the holly. And, in fact, the whole family is...
It's completely different. The holly is the outlier.
Holly's the outlier.
Same with,
the family's actually tropical.
Right.
This has happened over and over again.
Yeah. Same with the ivy. Crazy.
Yeah. And the whole ivy family.
Yeah.
You know, the Araliaceae is tropical, and there's just a few weird things up in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
You know, this has happened over and over again, and it's kind of
a bit weird when you've got, and particularly when you've got this type specimen type idea that you're going there. But it was interesting because when I was looking up, doing a little bit of background for this episode, the Aquifoliaceae is the hollies, and the
Araliaceae.
Araliaceae.
Are we getting too nerdy?
For the ivy.
Sorry.
But they're right next to each other in the family's book, and I thought that's nice, isn't it?
Oh,
the two families are right adjacent.
That's because it's alphabetical.
Because it's alphabetical, yeah. I thought that's quite nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also,
but in fact, the Araliaceae is next door to the Umbelliferae, the Apiaceae.
Oh, yeah, no, it was just because it was alphabetical.
I mean, they're partner families.
Yeah, it was just because of alphabet. But I also thought it's interesting that they've both got like a sort of medicinal plant that's really quite common in the same family. So for holly, it's the American, the beverage is the South American yerba mate.
Oh, mate.
Yeah, which is mate, which has got like that caffeine stimulus type.
That you find everywhere
which you find everywhere in South America. It's Paraguayanensis. Ilex paraguayanensis, so from Paraguay originally.
From Paraguay.
From Paraguay, but it's everywhere. It's in Argentina, it's in Chile, it's in Bolivia, it's all through there. And then, of course, the ivy, which I didn't know this, and I feel like I know a few things, but ginseng is in the same family as ivy. So all that medicinal plant there with ginseng. Yeah, Panax quinquefolia.
But I mean, the same with mistletoe. We sort of think of the mythological value, but it was a medicinal herb as well. And all, you know, again, the importance of and Matt can talk about the importance of plants relates to health as well.
Yeah, especially like and I think of things like the tataramoa. You know, like I don't know, that's probably a different gene, but what it does and how we use it would be really similar.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, and quite a lot of things that are toxic, we think of them as being toxic, and in large doses they are, but in small doses they're medicinal things, because I guess if something's going to make a difference in a large dose, it's toxic. So it's all about how much
balance.
You have. Now, we're running out of time here, so I'm just quickly going to say the botanical connection to the Magi, the three wise men or the three kings of Christmas. Who knows what it is? Anyone?
They're tree resins.
They're tree resins, they are. They're both tree resins. Hardened gum. And the names of the trees are really weird. The Boswellii tree is the frankincense, which was perfume and incense. So it was all about anointing the baby Jesus, and, you know, that, you know, he's coming, and the gold was to pay, apparently, for the stable, which was nice of them to bring.
That's very nice.
To bring the rent along.
Yeah.
And the myrrh, also a gum resin, is extracted from a small thorny tree from the Commiphora genus. And that is, it's an odd one, because that's used for anointing and embalming, or it was used for anointing and embalming.
But that's really significant in the Christian story. You know,
yeah.
He was born to die.
It was foreshadowing him being born to die. Yeah.
I thought they were on the way somewhere else and just having to pass.
No, they were following that star.
Yeah, but who knows where it was going.
Their wives had packed them for it. But what was really interesting was that the expensive things were not the gold.
No, it's
the myrrh was like super expensive.
Yeah.
The myrrh and the frankincense were really
because of those reasons. Yeah,
because of those. Yeah,
and those species now are very rare because they've been harvested. They're so valuable.
Yeah.
They have been harvested a lot in the wild. Very rare.
Now, I have run out of time to talk about all the ingredients in a Christmas cake and in the Lebkuchen, so I will add that to the Facebook social. But just to let everybody know that we have got some Christmas cake here, and it is the beautiful cake from the Alexa Johnson. I tried to get some idea of general of Christmas cakes, but I went on this real side quest. I went through books, and it seems like every book you look at, even if it's just a personal written book, has a different recipe for Christmas cake. And I thought, what do you think of as Christmas cake? Just quickly.
Well, I don't like Christmas cake,
you don't like
so
Christmas
I
cake,
avoid
Matt?
it like the plague.
I told you, I think of it as hunting cake.
Hunting cake. Janice, what's your think of Christmas cake?
Well, it's the most compact piece of calorie you can make with preserved fruit, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And soaked in alcohol to preserve it. So it's all about bringing out all the good stuff when you get past the shortest day.
Yeah, so it's all things that actually really aren't grown in Britain. Because the Christmas cake comes from Britain. It comes from what they used to call a plum pottage, which was a type of porridge that turned into the plum pudding.
But plums would have been in Britain. But it's the raisins and the sultanas.
There's no plums. Yeah,
not anymore.
No, there was never any plums in plum pudding. Plum just meant a sugary dried fruit. It never meant plums.
Like sugar plum fairies and plums.
They were always raisins. They were always raisins.
Yeah.
And so the plum pudding never had plums in it. The plums was a different meaning. And
I'll have plum pudding, but I won't have Christmas cake because it goes with brandy sauce.
And plum pudding was a thing because you could boil it in the cloth, so people could do it at home. And then plum pottage, which was the origin of plum pudding, was all through winter. But because people didn't have ovens in their house, you could make plum pudding and it would keep, and it had suet. And
you used to have to hang it for a couple of weeks. You wouldn't make it on Christmas Day.
No, you'd make it beforehand. And there's all sorts of things about stir up Sunday. I'm getting
everyone
told
stirs and
everyone
makes
stirs.
a wish.
If you don't stir, then it's bad luck. And it wasn't until we have the royal family to thank for the Christmas cake, and the Empire Marketing Board wanted to have a marketing thing, so they got different things. They had Canadian apples and parts from all of the Commonwealth, and that was all the ingredients that went into the Christmas cake. But the Christmas cake comes from the Christmas pudding, and the Christmas pudding comes from Charles Dickens.
Really?
Charles Dickens associated the plum pudding as the Christmas pudding, and then Eliza Ancott a couple of years later took and put the first recipe out. So 1848. And now we have to go.
Yep.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Enjoy your Christmas.
Enjoy your Christmas, whether you're having goose or turkey or whatever you're having.
Pavlova, the New Zealand dessert.
Pavlova, the New Zealand dessert.
Oh, no, we have, I don't know, a mess.
A mess.
Eat a mess.
We're having venison.
Oh, I know where you're going for Christmas dinner then.
Okay. Right. Ka kite.
Ka kite ana.
You've been listening to the OI podcast, the shout out for the arts, sciences and Mataranga Māori.
You can support this podcast by becoming a member of the OI. Check out the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences on Facebook or our website.
If you'd like to listen again to this episode or others from the series, look for the OI podcast on OAR FM's website, oar.org.nz.
Brought to you by the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences, the Otago branch of the Royal Society of New Zealand.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.